Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is another small video on the inheritance chapter, and this is the questions on paper 2, which might help you for your exam tomorrow. Starting with question number 1, sweet clover is a member of the pea and bean family, and these are called leguminous plants in which the fruit is in the form of a pod, like peas. I'm sure you've all had peas, and you shell the peas, you take out the peas, and you eat them. You have matar keema, and you make Matar gosht or something like that, and we eat it very often in our houses. So sweet clover is a member of the pea and bean family, leguminous plants that grow amongst grass in fields used for cattle feed. Explain how sweet clover can improve the soil in which it grows. Now leguminous plants, they have a bacteria called rhizobium bacteria, which have the ability to take atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into a soluble form. And these bacteria live in the roots of leguminous plants. And what do? You see, this is a pea, matar. And what do? They take the nitrogen compounds from the air and convert into ammonia, and then they convert it into amino acids. So the normal plant, which has to need nitrates from the soil, these plants do not need any nitrates from the soil because they are using the nitrogen of the air and combining it with the photosynthetic glucose and converting it to ammonia and then converting it into an amino acid. So nitrogen in the air is converted to ammonia and then is converted into an amino acid. So what do the bacteria now? Why is this called a mutually beneficial relationship, which is called a symbiotic relationship? The reason is why, because the bacteria get a free place to live, no rent, nothing. And they get the photosynthetic products, which is glucose. So they get food, they get ready-made food, but then what are they doing? How are they helping the plant? They're giving it, it doesn't need any nitrates from the soil. It is getting ready-made amino acids because it is fixing the nitrogen in the air and converting it into nitrogenous molecules. Now, normal plant can't do this. So please remember this nitro. This is the nitrogen fixing bacteria which live in the root nodules of leguminous plant, and the name of it is rhizobium. Well, you don't have to know the name of it, but I want you to be familiar with the name. Now, if you look at the question, I mean, what do the mark schemes say? Explain how sweet clover can improve the soil in which it grows. So, bacteria and root nodules fix nitrogen, plowing these into the soil. Once you've harvested the crop, then you just plow them into the soil so they just break up into tiny pieces and they mix with the soil. And then they're going to decay and decompose. And this will increase the nitrates in the soil. So, it will increase the soil fertility. Then it says as sweet clover dries, fungi that grow on it produce a chemical dicumarol that prevents blood from clotting. Suggest a protein that cattle which eat sweet clover affected by such fungi might be unable to produce. So you know what is the protein needed for clotting? That's fibrinogen. Or if you said fibrin, well, you got a mark for that. Then it said dicumarol has been used for many years as a constituent in a form of rat poison. Figure 5.1 shows the changes in the LD50 for dicumarol in rats from 2000 to 2015. The LD50 is a measure of the amount of poison that will kill 50% of the rats. So first in 2005 units of would kill them. Then in 2004 still 5 units. In 2008 now it's going up 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm just putting these figures 5, 10, 15. Always do that on a graph to explain it to yourself. In 2008, it's gone up to, I think, less than 7. Now, in 2012, it has gone up to 10. So, 10 units will need to kill 50% of the rats. Always explain this question to yourself. And by 2015, it's gone up and it's going up. And then here it is about nearly 12, 13, 14 units will kill the rats. So the LD50 is a measure of the amount of poison that will kill 50% of the rats that consume it. So if 100 rats eat it, 50 will die. In 2000, that was 5 units. In 2004, it is nearly 5 units, but now it's starting to increase. Now let's look at the next question. Describe the change in the LD50. I always say describe is no biology. You don't have to say anything biological. You just have to explain what is given in the graph. So if you lose these 2 marks, well, then you're very, very pathetic that you have lost these 2 marks because this was not any biology, just describing the graph. So describe the change in the LD50 for dicumarol in rats from 2000 to 2015. So no change from 2000 to 2004, 2, 3, any of these was correct. After that, there is an exponential increase. Now, if you did not know the word exponential, well, you should look it up in the Google search and look it up in the dictionary or the bio dictionary. What does exponential mean in biology? This is the sort of graph that I got. Exponential growth is unlimited resources and lack of predators results in unrestricted increase in population size. So you see this quick increase. Biotic potential of a population is growth that would occur in the absence of interfering factors. Such organisms are generalists. Well, okay, you can forget this part. But exponential growth means a great increase, a very, very big increase in a short time. In a short time, there is a very, very large increase. Then coming to part 2, suggest an explanation for the change you have described. First, it didn't change and then it is increased exponentially. So there is probably a mutation in the DNA. And now the rats are becoming resistant to the poison. First, only 5 units killed them. Now, 10 units are killing them. So they've become resistant to the poison. So the ones which are resistant are surviving. So they are surviving and they're producing offspring. So that resistant allele is going into the offsprings. And this is a form of natural selection. And now a greater amount is now required to kill, slash the LD50 must be increased. Now, this was all what you had to understand from the graph. This is nothing that you had to have some, of course, yes, the prior knowledge was the mutation and all that, but then you were picking up stuff from the graph. And that is something which you have learned to do. Suggest an explanation. Suggest is something I always tell you very difficult. It is going to differentiate between the A and the A star student. So a mutation took place. In where? Mutations take place in the DNA. So mutation occurring in the DNA got you 2 marks in one sentence. The rats that were resistant to the poison survived, and the ones that survived will produce offsprings. And this is a form of natural selection. And so a greater amount is now required to kill them because they become resistant. They will need more and more to kill them. Question 2, figure 4.1 shows the stages in the process of genetic engineering to produce the hormone insulin. So they've shown you a human cell and they've shown you a bacterium and they've shown you isolated DNA, isolated insulin gene, which they have removed. Then they've taken out the plasmids and the bacterial plasmids enzyme cut the plasmids. And then we've got the joint, the insulin gene inserted into the plasmid, and now you've got recombinant DNA. And then the transformed plasmid is inserted into a new bacteria to form transformed bacterium. And then these bacteria reproduce and they produce insulin for us. So you needed to explain this to yourself as I've just explained to you. Now describe how the location and organization of genetic material in the human cell shown in stage K is different from the bacterial cell. So we are talking of stage K, this one here. How is this different? How is this different? So it's very simple. It is very different. Now in the human cell, it's inside the nucleus. In the bacteria, it's in the cytoplasm of the bacteria. Then there is a thread and there is plasmids in bacteria. And the chromosomes are paired in humans. And chromosomes are present, chromosomes are only found in human cells. Do not call that, we call that a loop of DNA, which is present in bacteria. Then coming to part 2, it says use your knowledge of bacterial cells. Name 2 structures that the transformed plasmid must pass through to form a transformed bacteria. Naturally, the bacteria has a cell wall and it has a cell membrane. So in order to get the plasmid into the bacteria, we'd have to pass through the cell wall and the cell membrane. Then it says number 3, state the type of reproduction that takes place in stage M and use your knowledge in the process of cell division. Explain why it is important that this type of reproduction occurs. Asexual reproduction or binary fission, mitosis was allowed, though I don't agree with that. Explanation is because we want genetically identical cells produced, as all of them will produce insulin for us, right? So there were 3 marks for this. Name the conditions in human that is treated using insulin produced by the bacteria in stage N. Diabetes, again, it's a syllabus point. You have to know the name of this disease. Stage N of figure 4.1 may take place in a container similar to that used in the large scale production of antibiotics. And what was that? That's a fermenter. Again, something that you have to know. Then it says genetic engineering can also be used to produce crop plants for humans to eat. Discuss the potential advantages and dangers of using genetic engineering to produce crop plants for humans to eat. So, number one, they can be nutritionally, we add vitamin D to rice and they can, of course, have more vitamin D. So, number one, of course, it can, advantages are there's going to be increased yield. Increased yield means more crop per unit area. They will be able to grow in new areas where there's drought or there's less water or there is marshy soil or salty soil. So, we will genetically engineer them. More predictable results than selective. We will know, okay, well, this is the type of wheat crop and this is what we want out of them. So we genetically engineer them to our needs. And we were able to transfer genes. We can nutritionally improve rice crops, having more vitamin D in them, or oranges with more vitamin C in them. So even if you have one orange, well, that's fine instead of having 6 oranges to get the same vitamin C content. Then, of course, the dangers were, of course, very specific. You must know these. This is a syllabus point. Dangers are risk of genetic spread to other species. What if these genes that you have put in them spread to other wild species or spread to other crops? And we don't want that to happen. And maybe animals eat that crop. And number two, it costs too much. Number three, unknown risk to health of other species. We don't know with humans eating this crop. Maybe after 10, 15 years, we find out it results in gallbladder stones and kidney stones. So we are experimenting on human beings. They are the guinea pigs. No, I'm sorry, we can't do that. That's very, very ethically wrong. And possible risk to genes of other species. So it's very general. The dangers have all, we've talked about these dangers a lot of time as biologists. And we always think that this is something we are imagining too much, but there will not be any such dangers. So, well, I hope that we are saved from any of these dangers because it would be lethal. It will kill millions of people. Now, coming to question number 3, define the term allele. Form of a gene, codes for a specific protein, can be dominant, recessive, or codominant. Now, the B part of the question is, which is the one which you find difficult. In mice, the allele for black is dominant. So, black furred mice will either be big B, or big B, small b. Is dominant to the allele for white. So, the white mice will always be small b, small b. Can't be anything else. White ones will always be small b, small b. Now, 2 mice with black fur were mated to produce offsprings, all of which were black. One of these black offspring was then mated with a mouse with white fur. Equal numbers of mice with black and white fur. Now, you've got to understand this is only possible, equal number is only possible when we have heterozygous. Now, complete the genetic diagram to show the pattern of inheritance in each cross. Now, look, there are 2 crosses which you have to complete. So the first one were both were black. Now, why have you to get a small b in here? Why you've got to get a small b? Because you see, if you have an offspring small b, then there has to be one b coming from the mother and one b coming from the father. So if one in the next cross, we have one which is white, well, that has to be small b, small b. So then a small b has to come from the black parent. So this is what you have to understand is whenever you have to get a homozygous recessive as a cross, so one small b must come from the mother, one small b must come from the father. So in the first one, it was big B into big B, small b. First one, we had a homozygous dominant crossed with a heterozygous. So we got a homozygous dominant, and so these were all black. Then in the second cross, we crossed this one, the black fur, the heterozygous, because as I told you, if you have to have a white fur, then one parent has to give you the small b and the other parent has to give you the small b. So there has to be like this. There has to be a small b coming. Only then you can have a child with small b, and that is white fur. And this one, of course, would be black fur. So this was a question which everybody needs to go through and understand how we do these questions. Question number 4, figure 6, 7.1 shows bacteria growing on the surface of the dish containing nutrient jelly. All these tiny dots that you see are actually bacterial colonies. And this one dot means maybe a couple of million bacteria, and just one dot. Paper discs such as M and N were soaked in solution of different antibiotics and placed on top of the growing bacteria. So we've got the bacteria growing, and on top of that, we place this paper which has an antibiotic, and this antibiotic diffuses out and kills the bacteria. So a clear area on the jelly indicates that bacteria in that area have been killed. So this is the clear area, this is a bigger clear area around it. So that means these bacteria were killed. Then there's another clear area around this one, so it's a smaller clear area. Then this one also has a smaller clear area, and this one also has a small. You see, whenever we do these tests as doctors, I have a patient who has urinary infection. So I say, okay, go and have a urine culture and sensitivity. So what they do is they take the urine and they culture it. They see if there are any bacteria present. So they will grow it on this petri dish. And then after that, they will, after 24 hours, then they see that bacterial growth, and then they will place antibiotics on it. And after another 24 hours, they will send the doctor a report that this antibiotic is killing the bacteria which this patient has in her or his urine. This is a normal thing which I would do for a patient suffering from urinary infection. So it says use the information above and your knowledge of the process of natural selection to describe and explain the difference in appearance of the jelly surrounding discs M and N. In M, there is a clear area, so that means all the bacteria here have been destroyed. While in N, there is no clear area, so that means this antibiotic is useless. It is not going to kill any of the bacteria which were present on the petri dish. And this, of course, helps us to treat people suffering from bacterial infections. Now, we start the explanation for it, and M has a clear area and N has no clear area. Well, that's an explanation, okay, but why? Bacteria killed around M, not killed around N. Then what has happened? There has been a gene mutation. You see, genetic information on the bacteria has resulted in a change, and now it is producing a chemical which will destroy that antibiotic, so now it will become resistant to it. So, resistant to antibiotic. Bacteria around M killed around M, not around N. So what has happened is that they have developed resistance to antibiotics. Resistant ones survive. The resistant ones reproduce and pass on the resistance to their offsprings. So all will become resistant, and now we will have to develop new antibiotics. And in N, it was the incorrect antibiotic for bacteria in N, so none of them were killed, or maybe they were all resistant ones. But in the other ones, some of them have been killed. So for disk M, you had to say that, and for disk N, you would have to say, well, this is what has happened. Mutation in this mutation has occurred in the one which has a clear area, and N has the one which has a no clear area. You see, if an antibiotic does not kill a bacteria, it means it is resistant to that antibiotic. It is resistant to that antibiotic. So they placed different antibiotics on it. Some killed them, some did not kill them. So this is how we learn how to give the right antibiotics to a patient who is suffering from a bacterial infection. Please remember, antibiotics do not kill viruses. Then coming to the B part of the question, describe how the process of artificial selection differs from that of natural selection. Include reference to the production of one named economically important plant or animal in your answer. Now you can give any example. I am not saying give this example, but the example that I am giving is a high milk yielding cow. You actually cross these and you try to get an offspring which has high milk yielding. Why? Because when milk sells in the market, human beings buy milk for tea, coffee, ice cream, anything like that. So more milk, more money, and these are of course people who are dairy farmers. And what have they done is that they have selected different male and female and then they breed them, and then they repeat this over several generations, and finally we get a high milk yielding cow. So you have to give me any example of this. I'm not saying you could have sent a high yielding wheat crop, a high yielding rice crop, a high yielding sugarcane crop. So this is what you have to understand, is that you can talk of anything. In artificial selection, it is actually the only thing which we have to think about is human benefit. I don't call it benefit, I call it greed more, because it's human greed, greed for money. And of course, we want more money, more money. I don't know what we're going to do with that money, but that's a human, very fake emotional need of there for money. So, human benefit is a point of artificial selection. Natural selection is which is happening in environment selects. There's less rain, so drought. So the ones with the shorter roots, those plants will die. That's natural selection. But in artificial selection, it's always human benefit. So high milk yielding cow, more money, dairy farmers benefit, crossbreed, you breed them together, and then after many generations, finally you get that animal which is going to give high milk yielding. That finishes this few questions on inheritance as asked by you all, and I hope this is going to be helpful for tomorrow's exam. And best of luck, and thank you for watching my videos.